what I have found is that people don't actually want you to be that perfect persona and hide all those things. They actually want you to share that so they know it's okay for them too.
Hello there, this is Bex Craig and you're listening to the Not Just Anything podcast for women who want it whole. I hope you'll join me each week as we hear real stories from real women about how they've curated a whole life by design rather than by default. Today I'm talking to Sara Morales, who is a talent leader based in San Francisco. Sara is a passionate leader who spent her life amplifying and supporting other leaders, both her work and in her personal life. In our conversation, she shares brilliant insights about what the future of work might hold, and also compelling stories about how she herself has navigated her own career and supported the career of countless others around her. I found our conversation to be full of actionable advice wrapped in a blanket of genuine humility and authenticity. I really can't wait for you to listen. A big welcome to Sara Morales, who's joining us today from California, US. How are you?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation, and thanks for taking the evening call so that we could make this possible.
Not a problem. Likewise.
So usually I jump right in, and the first question is really a big one, but you know, we all are the people that we are because of the experiences that we've had along the way. How would you describe who you are and the person that's sitting in front of us today?
Oh, wow. That is a big one.
Yeah.
I think I would describe myself as a pretty normal human. And I say that in that there are some things that I think are very unique about me. Part of that is I actually am one of the few people that I work with, I'll say, that was actually born and raised in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. So many people have traveled from all over the world, all over the country to be here. But I am proud to kind of have my roots here in the Bay Area and have grown up here. And I think it's kind of shaped, you know, who I am, that is part of my roots. And my family is still close. I'm really close to my parents and my brothers. And I think if I were to describe who I am, I think some of the ways that I think about myself are, you know, in the names that people call me. So, you know, mom and wife and daughter are definitely in the top. And then I very much am proud of and think of myself as a career person as well. I think that's a lot of who shapes me. And I'm really proud to kind of be able to balance, or whatever that means, kind of those different roles in my life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that these are the names and the roles, and because it's something that we talk a lot about on this show is the fact that that's usually also how we identify with all these different roles that we play, and they're far-reaching by the sounds of things also in your life. And so you mentioned there lots of different roles, and you also touched on balance, which I'd love to explore a little bit further with you. But just, I guess, to start with, maybe you can unpick a bit about, like, professionally what those roles are for you, and yeah, what that looks like on a daily basis.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just take a step back, because again, I think this is somewhat unique in that I picked my profession in college and stuck with it. There was a person when I was in college who became a mentor to me. So when I was in university here in the United States, I was part of a sorority, and my advisor at the time was in an HR organization at Cisco. And she really crafted that in my mind, that was something that I was interested in. And part of that was I wanted to emulate her a bit. I still, to this day, she is a mentor of mine, someone that I stay very close with, someone I still go to for career advice. But I kind of lucked into it a bit because it ended up being something I loved to do within human resources. So I got my degree in that. I started working at Cisco, and I've really kind of navigated in and out of human resources my entire career. But I've really had the opportunity to have I would say, many different opportunities within a company, kind of moving around and being able to work with lots of different types of leaders, having lots of different types of teams, getting so much global exposure. Growing up, I would say my world was very small. Even though I grew up in the Bay Area and it got very international over time, I actually didn't travel internationally until I started working at Cisco. And my first trip was to Thailand by myself as a 20
Wow.
nothing year old.
Wow.
And so that kind of global exposure and getting kind of international views has really become important to me as a professional. I think continuing to grow my craft for myself and continuing to develop my own skills and capabilities. And lastly, I would say something that's really important for me professionally is growing others, both people that are on my team, people that I mentor and coach. I find myself spending quite a bit of time with others, kind of playing that role of mentor and coach. And I really, really enjoy it.
Mm.
Today, the role that I am in within Cisco is really focused on leadership and how we enable leaders to be the best leaders they can be, but also be genuine and authentic and unique and human, and also focused on teams and kind of how we get the best out of teams and how people can show up as their true selves within a team and contribute in that way.
Yeah, it's such important work, I think, so fundamental. And I can imagine, I wouldn't imagine the easiest of years for that to happen. So how has your last year been, to kind of hold leaders, hold teams, empower people to show up as themselves where they're managing such fraught times?
Yeah, it definitely has been, we can use the words that have been used so often by others, unprecedented or challenging, or, we can fill in the blank with so many different things. I also think this has been a year, a little bit of gratitude in terms of being grateful for the things that people do have. And so it definitely, I would say, has been challenging because we are asking leaders to show up in such a different way. We're asking leaders to connect with their team members and their employees in a very human way that historically, I think we've asked them to just show up at work or manage, tasks or give tasks and manage performance. And now we're asking them to step into their employees' homes and invite them, their employees and their team members into their homes because everyone is at home. And with that comes, families and challenges at home and other dynamics that come into play, working hours. How do we define that? And how do we help leaders that are not as comfortable with making those connections kind of step into that in a way that does feel authentic? And how do we help them be a little bit more courageous about that and know that it doesn't have to be perfect? It's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. That's actually not what people want. They don't want perfection. They just want that connection.
Yeah, I think it's so true. Like this drive around perfection, which is everywhere, and yet that's not what we connect to. Because we can't resonate with that so much as human beings. And I've asked you this, but it's sort of like a play on that initial first question. Then who are you when you're showing up fully as yourself?
I think I'm slightly quirky. I think I am caring. I think I'm willing to put things out there knowing that it might not be right. I think I am a connector. So I really like to connect dots and I like to play with that a little bit. Like, what if we, or how about? So I think I'm able to freely throw out ideas without risk of failure. Because even if it's wrong, it's not failure. I think that I'm also able to share stories outside of work and kind of bring in my family. They're such a huge part of who I am. I think when I'm able to bring that in, that's how I know it's there.
Yeah. And so it's a perfect segue there. So you're a working parent as well. You've two children. Is that right?
I do. I have a 13-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter.
From what I understand, in the US and in particular on the West Coast, it's like children haven't been in school for a long time. Have your children have you been also homeschooling and kind of managing all of those things as well?
Yes, our kids, I think they last went to school March 10th or so of 2020. So it's coming up on a year that they haven't
Ooh.
been to school. And I consider myself so incredibly lucky around this because of the age of my kids. I definitely feel like I am managing kind of, are they doing their work and are they keeping up on things and do they have questions and all of that. But I have also found that our kids are fairly independent. And so they're able to manage that. Now, granted, I put a lot of structure in the beginning to help, as a crutch to start. But I'm not, I don't have a child that's the age where I have to sit down with them and, get on the calls every day and that kind of thing. And that is a huge differentiator. So I have so much empathy for parents that do have that. This is also not a milestone year for my kids. They're not graduating high school or, starting school for the first time. And so I try to remind myself, and I have my days where I definitely have moments of, I lose this for a moment, but this is not going to make or break their careers or their livelihood. They're at ages where if they miss an assignment or fail a test or get something wrong, like, it will be fine. And so I have to remind myself that and kind of keep my cool around that at times, although I don't always do it perfectly.
Well, I mean, again, because perfection is really not what the bar should be for ourselves. And I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job. And so, how have you did say a little bit like I put a lot of structure in place. So, how have you designed your life? You said yourself, I've got all these other roles that I'm playing, and I won't call it balance because I don't actually think I personally don't believe that that's a thing. I'd love to hear your views on that. But like, what have you done to really design your life in a way that equips you to play all of these roles, to lead the life that matters to you?
Yeah. And I'll say first, I also don't believe in balance per se. I use the word, but I kind of use it a little tongue in cheek
Mm,
in that I think that our lives are all intertwined, meaning sometimes work will come up. Sometimes I need to, step away completely. Sometimes, my kids are in here with me while I'm working. Sometimes I need to go be with them. I think that the other thing for me is, how do I integrate kind of my own health? And I love to run, and that's super
right.
important to me. So that the piece around taking care of myself is also, I think, a big piece of that, which we often can forget. But to directly kind of answer your question, I do think what is important to me, I'm a very like structured individual, so I like to kind of run things on a spreadsheet. When we first went into the remote schooling, I did kind of establish a spreadsheet for my kids around blocks of time. So in this block of time you're going to work on schoolwork, and this block of time you need to get outside and breathe some fresh air and have some exercise. This block of time is yours. This block of time you can have some screen time. And so I think even just putting a little bit of structure to just set some guidelines around how, and if they spent more time on screen time, one day or the next, again, fine. But at least we kind of got into a groove that then kind of picked up. So that just has carried us through. And I think that has been hugely beneficial for me because I don't have to every day be worried about, are they doing this, or have we checked the box, or have they been in front of their screens too long? Because I feel like that's kind of been adopted from the beginning. And that's, I would say, kind of how I tend to live my life, especially now. There's some key pillars that are really important. As long as we're hitting those, we're doing okay.
Yeah, I think it's funny because as you were talking, one of the things that I talk a lot about is that there's a lot of structure that we put in place for our young children, for our children, and for our businesses. And then as adults, and especially as, women and working mums or whatever, sometimes we kind of overlook the need for that structure for ourselves. You said, I love running. And there are ways that we can curate our life to make sure that those things that really fuel us, that make us feel ourselves, that make us feel fulfilled, are actually prioritized in this long laundry list of stuff that we also have to do. So I love that you talk about it like pillars. And when you are working with, in particular, I'm kind of curious about when you're working with sort of young female leaders or young females in the organization, what are some of the things that you have learned along the way that you're sort of wanting to share, that you're wanting people to hold on to earlier or sooner?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come most top of mind, and it's actually conversations that I've had, super recently. One is figure out what you want and declare it. No one else can declare that for you. And if it's not you, then who? And it doesn't have to be what you want for your lifetime. It can be what you want this week, this month, this year, your next career move, a pay raise, a promotion. But someone said that to me, actually, one of my leaders said that to me before. And I think we do not do a good job of that. It starts with figuring out what the thing is and then having the courage to declare it or put it out there. Even just putting it out there in the universe, I think is a start before telling the person who maybe is making the decision. So that's, I would say, the first thing. The second thing, and this kind of gets back to managing your time element of it. There was someone on my team recently that asked for some time away. And I said to them, listen, I'm so appreciative that you asked me for this time. I want to be clear, your time is yours. You can, let me know if it's something urgent that comes up and I need something, we can have that conversation, but your time is yours. So claim that. Absolutely work with me on when you're not going to be here so we can figure out how we can get the work done or support you in that. But your time is always yours. And I feel like that's really important because it's something I think we forget so often. And then, the third piece is ask questions. You may not always get the answers you want, but you'll get information and you get to make decisions on what that information is. So ask as many questions as you want and then figure out what you want to do with that information.
Thank you, by the way, for giving such a concise answer. And also, they all sound very much like getting on the front, declare it, claim your time, ask questions. Like it's quite a active state to be. And yet, if I were to sort of push you on the declaring your kind of like vision for yourself or the life that you, what is it that you are declaring is important for you as you move forward, or what is the vision that you're hoping to paint for yourself, for your family, for the people and the things that matter to you?
Yeah, I think those things are really around feeling fulfilled, feeling like I'm adding value. And when I say adding value, that can be a very like buzzwordy phrase. What I mean by that is that feeling like the work I'm doing at home, in my community, at work, the stuff I'm doing, in some cases it's not work, feels like it gives me that buzz. And I want to continue to feel like that. And when that starts to go away, I know I need to change something. And again, that's my choice. I need to make those changes. But for me, that continues to be spending time with my kids and my husband, being healthy and exercising and doing work that feels like it feels important and of value to me and others. And I think the last thing I'll say, and this has also become more and more true to me over the last year around the people that I surround myself with. Again, both at work, kind of who's on my team, who I work for, who I partner with, and the people that I allow in my social bubble. We've had to be so selective with the people that we let into our bubbles most recently. And I think that's brought a lot of things to light for me on who I selected and why and what that's done. In some cases, I've had to go back on some of these relationships and go, yeah, I'm actually okay that we're not spending as much time together because of the way I feel. And so I think that's been really enlightening.
It's funny because I think to say fulfillment for me is when I feel this sensation that I'm buzzing, that or in all areas of my life. It's as powerful a kind of vision as it can get because it's your guiding light. It's like, oh, I'm not feeling that right now, as you said, and I'm going to connect. And it's true that can manifest across different things. Like, do I feel buzzy in this relationship? No. Okay. Why might that be? What is it that's not lighting me up about it? And so for you, that's the sense of kind of fulfillment and wholeness and the life that you want to live. What happens when you create the impact that you want to have?
I'm going to give you a short example because I think this is something
Okay.
that I did this year, and within the U.S. and everyone has their beliefs on politics and such, and so I won't get into that so much. But this year, it felt super important to somehow get involved in the election process, and part of that was around kind of who ended up in the highest positions in the government. But part of that was also making sure that everybody had the opportunity to kind of have their voice heard and have their vote counted. There was so much around that in the US. And so I volunteered to work at a polling place, so where people cast their votes
Wow.
and kind of be a part of that voting process and that election process was so important to me. And so for me, that was something I was willing to kind of risk. And I say that in a bit of quotes because there was so many protections put in place. But the impact and the feeling around that rose so far above kind of the nervousness or anxiety that I was having around COVID. And I felt so incredibly proud of that. And I brought my kids to kind of see what that looked like. And again, that's an example of kind of how that shows up and the type of work. It doesn't have to be that thing, but things that I believe in, kind of getting behind them and doing something about it, not just saying it.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds really values driven. That's to me when you're talking, I'm hearing like a very strong values driven response to what was going on.
Yes, absolutely. Lots of people
Yeah.
here in the US and I'm sure around the world had lots of emotion and it did connect with their values one way or another. But that did feel like a very strong pull for me.
Mm. Yeah. What was the value that was activating for you?
A couple things. I think one, overall, kind of the election process itself was part of ensuring that everybody had their voice heard that wanted to, and that everyone had the opportunity. So I would say that was one thing. The decisions that I was hoping for and where we did end up was really about compassion and empathy and kind of again this human element. It's similar themes, but also around what I believe in as far as leadership and what I believe our country and our world kind of should be about and the way that that happens and how we as a society kind of deal with issues and problems and who speaks on our behalf. There definitely was an imbalance in my mind. And so feeling like we have that balance, feeling like decisions are made in the right way, that the beliefs are grounded in people and humans and the betterment of those things.
Mm. Yeah, humans. It's like that same phrase that grounded in humans, human centered, humans at the core, and a little bit I'm hearing, and these are my words, so they may not resonate, but around justice and fairness and having a space where what you've said at the start about the organization is a place where everybody can thrive. Wow, well, it's so powerful, and I must say, like, I deeply connect and deeply resonate also with what you're saying, and so I'll just own that bias because I think that it's been stressful. It's been very stressful. If you're a first time leader, it's been very stressful. I mean, really for anybody, this has not been a usual year, as you said, unprecedented, etc. And yet in some ways, what I've been saying to especially female leaders is we all come into this thinking we're not enough of this, or we're not got enough experience, or I'm just this, or I'm just that, or whatever it might be, which is really the premise of this podcast, which is you're not just anything, you are all of what you're bringing. And yet, has this year not served as a great illustration of how many of us, most of us, are figuring things out as we go? Even the highest leaders in the world are still not experience something like this and are figuring it out. And so it's about summoning that confidence within and knowing what your innate value is and what you uniquely bring. Do you still tell yourself any stories about, oh, I'm not enough of this, or I'm just, or and what have you done to kind of overcome that? Or I guess just getting curious about that for yourself as a leader.
Yes, absolutely. So, one thing that I will say is I think one of the gifts that this year has brought us is kind of tapping into so many leaders and experts, whether it be Brene Brown or Simon Sinek, or, pick the person that you most resonate with. There are so many brilliant people out there, that those individuals have become so much more prominent because there has been such a need for it. So I think that has really been one of the things that has been a huge benefit. I will say this. I will say that I absolutely still have all of those, that voice in my mind in terms of you're just or you're not. And I went through something called Courageous Leader. It was a leadership experience that we do within Cisco. And there was actually a whole segment around that. And one of the tips or the ways that we talked about kind of dealing with that, which I do utilize, and I actually was talking to someone about it just the other day, is as I kind of have those thoughts within myself and I question myself, I think, would I let someone speak about my husband or my kids or my best friend or in that way? And most of the time, the answer is no way. There's no way that I would let someone say that about someone that I loved. So why do I do that to myself? And so it's just a little bit of like I catch myself and then I try to move it aside. I also think just a moment, and I've been chatting with my own coach about this, just taking a moment to like pause and acknowledge and taking that step back from it, I think is a practice that I've started to really think about. And then, this is such a silly one that I think lots of people maybe use, but, sticky notes of, reminders or from other people, I think are hugely beneficial. We all have, the notes of kudos or the things that people have said about us, or the thanks that we've been given, or, the picture from your child that is, something that you cherish. And I think just kind of going back to those things and reminding yourself the way others see you.
I know why you said a lot of people probably do this. And yet I do think that this practice of kind of little reminders to yourself, you said catching yourself and noticing it, which I think is a fundamental first step, because if we can't even hear how we're talking to ourselves, we don't notice it, then we don't notice that might be what's actually holding us back, what's stopping us from moving forward. And as soon as you do start to notice it, then you're at choice. Then you can decide, is this really useful for me to be beating myself up like this? Or as you say, when you frame it in the view of, would I say that to anybody? No, like you said, no way would we speak to other people like we speak to ourselves. No way. Gosh, super powerful. And I suppose kind of is, the whole way through this conversations, you've had multiple different things that I think people could just be writing down. These are amazing tips and great advice. But I suppose, is there one message that you really want to kind of get out there? Is there one thing or a thought that you have that you would want to share with people that are looking at you and thinking, what an inspiring person, what an amazing woman. How can I curate my life? How can I design it in such a way? What is the message here that you want people to hear?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, by the way. We all, again, so appreciate those words of kindness and just, a little bit of reminders that we're all working hard and doing our best. But so that program that I mentioned that I went through, there was an amazing coach as part of that. And one of the things that I had been working on for some time was letting go and kind of not having this perfect persona. Everything didn't have to be buttoned up and always choosing the right words and having the right outfit and the right hair, or, saying the right thing, or, not admitting when things were sideways, or everything, like feeling like I needed to have this perfect persona. And so I've very much been working hard to let go of that and kind of showing failures and mistakes. I am a big believer in when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong, and then I move on. And I'll say it out loud. Like, when I get it wrong, I get it wrong. And I think I just got it wrong. And I'm sorry, like, I'm going to fix it. And then I allow myself to move forward. And that's one way that I think I get past that. But this woman, she knows that this is something that I've been working on, and kind of being more open and vulnerable and transparent about things. And so she sent me this shirt that says perfectly imperfect. And so on the days when I need that, I think that is something that I've really been sitting with. And that's what I would offer to others as well. Because what I have found is that people don't actually want you to be that perfect persona and hide all those things. They actually want you to share that so they know it's okay for them too.
Totally. And how did you step into that? Because it's a shift for a lot of us that have spent our whole lives, like you described, buttoning up, being perfect, and often told, by the way, that that's how we should show up and that's how we
Yeah.
to be successful. There's a lot of conditioning around that as well, especially for women. And so, step one, how did you start to shake that off and get into that let it go? And then step two, what did that open up for you?
So I think the way that I did it was one, I had a great leader who gave me the feedback that I did it because I didn't even realize that I was doing that. And this person said to me, people actually want to see you for who you are, not like who you're showing up as sometimes. And so the way that I went around that was I practiced. I like did little things that I was comfortable with, like sharing where things weren't going, well or, exactly as they should be. And then, I got more and more comfortable and I saw people's reaction. And for me, I think that was what made the biggest difference was seeing how people reacted to that and
The
the
impact.
connections that I was able to make as a result, which I love connections. I'm all about them. And so it opened the door for me to do it so much more. Again, it's something I continue to work on, but I think that was it. And just last year I was hosting something here and my aunt said to me something along the lines of, well, I know your motto is never let them see you sweat, which in the US is basically like never show that, anything is wrong, like everything is perfect. And I looked at her and I was like, yeah, I don't say that anymore. um,
Nice.
so, I think it's been really interesting. And I also feel like there's been a shift actually in society. I was having a conversation with a leader about how, historically, as we've kind of trained people to become executives, we've had very much kind of a cookie cutter or a template for what that looks like. Again, in the way they look, dress, act, speak. And then when they get to be executives, we want them to, take all that off and be human and authentic. And it's like, well, why not just start there? Why not start with being human and authentic in yourself and see where that takes you and be successful in that way. And that way you don't have to completely, reposition yourself and, reprogram yourself to be something else. And so I think for me, that's the impact that it's had.
Yeah. And can you imagine in 20 years' time the type of leaders that will be there because they haven't had to build that armor up all over and then trying to figure out quickly how to remove it. Honestly, I feel lighter because I can imagine the type of leaders that you're grooming and this type of message and imagining then what is possible for the future makes me feel really kind of relieved in a way that this is kind of the vision that you are holding for us all. And so I'm excited to kind of see how this will look. And I guess just to push you a little bit, because obviously you're an HR leader, you've got so much experience. What is the future of work that you are all seeing? Do you see this environment where, leaders are showing up authentically, that we're all in this kind of remote setting? What is that? What are you all planning for to prepare us for the future?
Yes, I would say I think that we are very much, as we think about the future of work, so much more thinking about the integration of everything that's in front of us. So work and life and home and business and everything else. And so I think, leaders that are able to think about how they approach their work and their life and their home in that way, I think is the future. And who knows where that will take us, because I am learning a ton from kind of our next generation of leaders. And they are very values driven from everything that I have seen. And I think that is going to have so much benefit and impact on all of us.
It's so exciting. I'm getting like tingly because I do think that that's where we should be. I mean, we have created what I think is an unhealthy lack of integration that's been present. And if nothing else, I mean, obviously this has been incredibly harrowing time for a lot of people. And it's something that to have lived through, I think we'll all reflect on with as a very important marker in time. But if nothing else, if this has dramatically swung the pendulum towards us thinking more holistically about how people live and the type of values-driven approach that we can bring and how people can show up and how we can integrate life a bit more fully so that we get the most out of people, then wouldn't that be a great outcome, if nothing else?
Absolutely. And one thing that you just said just really resonated with me. I also think that allows people to ask for help. And I don't think that's something that we have done well, especially as women, but generally, and I think that this environment is actually allowing us to not only ask for help, but offer help as well. And so I think that's going to be a big part of where we go.
Yes. And oh gosh, wouldn't that be great as well? Wouldn't we all want to ask for a bit more help? Like I've said a few times, I think there's multiple different things that you've said that really resonate for me and that I'm sure will resonate greatly with our listeners. Just as we close things out, is there any last thoughts that you want to offer, anything that you want to leave people with?
The one thing I might leave people with is just the idea around courage. And right now, I think that it does feel a bit harrowing, and it does feel like there's so much ahead of us. And courage can show up in so many different ways. And so, be courageous. But even if that means just taking one step towards it, so do it, because I think everyone will be really happy once they did. And it will feel scary, but do it in a place where you feel safe.
Courage. Yes, 100%. And I think thank you for your courage today in sharing your story and in sharing a bit about your learnings along the way. And I'm excited to see the world that you've described and painted and leaders stepping into their courage, but also every one of us. As when you said to me, wouldn't it be great if people are taught right at the outset to be themselves and that they can show up authentically in terms of what that will produce in the future? I just had this aha moment. Yeah, of course. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And imagine what 20 years from now will look like if people are able to be themselves and shine as themselves. So courage, perfect way. Honestly, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the conversation. I think, thank goodness that there are leaders like you helping other leaders in the world. And I'm excited to live in this world that you're describing.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. This has been so wonderful.
Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Not Just Anything for Women Who Want It Whole. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to our weekly podcast and leave us a review. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here with us, and we look forward to having you join again. And remember, be brave, be whole,